Hello and welcome to another Talk About It Tuesday live video on Harmony Music Education's Facebook page. I'm Craig Harmon and it is so good to talk to you today. Today's topic is going to be one of the most essential and necessary things for musicians. It's called practice. When we practice, we improve. But when we practice, we have to practice well and efficiently and using that time wisely. So we're going to dive into a couple different things regarding practice today. What practice is not and what practice is. And I'm going to give you a few tips to help you as you're learning how to practice, whether it's for you or for your child. So, what practice is not? Let's start there. Practice is not just playing through the song from beginning to end a specific number of times. So, back in the day when I took lessons, and when I was 5 years old and wanting to learn how to play the piano, that was how I wanted to practice. I wanted to just get it over and done with. I wanted to just be done with it, play it, move on to the next thing. The problem with that is, if I sit down and practice everything from beginning to end 5 times, and it's easy music, that's good, and it's building good habits. But what happens when the music starts to go up in difficulty? And that was the challenge I faced. Because I was so used to playing the song over and over, and I'd make mistakes. And then I would say, well, okay, but how do I don't know how to fix the mistakes. So I had to learn how to practice throughout all my years of learning how to make music. I ran into a whole lot of frustration and even tears because of this. And I try to do my best to save my students and save musicians that frustration and that tears, because the more you face that, the easier it is to want to give up. And I don't want students to give up, because making music is such an amazing and beautiful thing that grows you and challenges you and brings so many things out of you. So we have to push through. We have to figure out how to practice and what that looks like. So here's where we're going to dive into the crux of it all. So if practice isn't playing it through from beginning to end a certain number of times, how do you practice? Well, what you want to do is look over the music even before you play it. Really? Look at the music? Yes. I do this with my students regularly. We look for patterns, we look for repetition, and we mark it up. So that way you're looking and saying, oh, hey, this part right here is the same as this part right here. This is good to know because it's the exact same thing. And this happens quite often in music where there is patterns that are repeated, whether it's rhythm patterns, whether it's note patterns, or even better, note and rhythm patterns altogether. So as you're doing that, that helps you right off the bat to simplify the music and make it easier before you even press a key. The next thing to look at is looking at rhythm. If the song's all quarter notes, that's fairly easy, right? But it's looking for those difficult rhythms that may come along. Identifying if there's a dotted quarter note to eighth note rhythm, that can be a challenge, because that dotted quarter note gets 1.5 counts and is a little bit longer than what you want. So identifying those, even clapping, counting, tapping, whatever works best for you, or even all three. Amazing, right? But going through the rhythm, this is even before you sit down and play a note. And then when you do play a note, what happens for many students is when we start at the beginning, we go all the way to where there's a problem, and then we stop, right? And then where do we go? Back to the beginning. The problem is that reinforces that spot. And you get really good at the beginning, but not so great after that. So, one of the best things that you can do when you're practicing, because we have technology, we have phones, we have ways to record ourselves, is record yourself. Listen to, because one of the challenges is when we're practicing, we get so much tunnel vision and focused in on what we're doing that we don't always listen for the big picture. So, being able to record yourself and go back and listen and follow along in the music makes all the difference. But when you come up to that trouble spot, what I've found, and this was something I've learned along the way, if you make a mistake once, that could be because your mind wandered, you lost focus. Okay, great. Do it again. If that spot comes up again, then it's time to take a look. Sit down and figure out what is the challenge. Now, this is the great thing that I've learned in learning how to practice is normally it's not always that spot that's the challenge. It's sometimes leading into that spot or leading out of that spot. So, working on that little bit leading into it, working on that little bit leading out of it really helps. But here's the most important part. If you're playing a song that you know, the challenge is your brain and your ears know what the song is supposed to sound like. It automatically gauges the speed, right? The problem is we don't use our fingers if we're playing piano. We don't use the fingers like we really should to be able to keep up with that speed that's up here. So going slowly, this was a lesson I had to learn the hard way, and I still get reminded of it again and again. Going slowly really helps. That doesn't mean that you're going to play the entire thing that slow when you're performing it. No. But starting out so that you're able to really excel and be less frustrated, having no tears, because we don't want tears making music, unless they're tears of joy or tears of just awe and beauty. We want to be able to do things as excellently as possible. And so what that does is that reinforces that connection between the eyes, the brain, and the fingers, right? And that's what we want to go for. We want that to really, really excel. So, slow is important. Slow is necessary because when you go slow, that really helps. Recording yourself really helps as well because that way you're able to go back and review and really focus in on looking at the music and listening. There are usually a couple of spots specifically that are challenges. I tell students this all the time that it would really be nice if music was just one long scrolling line of music with a bouncing ball that we could just follow along. But the problem is, because our music is laid out on a page, we have a line of music and we get to the end of the line, and just like reading a book, you have to go to the next line. Guess where many problems come in? Yeah, you guessed it. At the end of the line, because we have to quickly jump our eye to the next line and be able to keep up because that meter still is going, right? So you get to that end of the line, beat 4 is there, beat 1 is right there at the beginning of that next line, and it happens immediately, especially if you're playing a faster piece. So that's a great place to really lean into focusing on right off the bat is looking at, okay, if I've got a whole note at the end of that line, that works really well because I can play that whole note, already shift my eye, and be ready to go for that next first beat. Sometimes that doesn't always work, and so you have to really work at that a little bit and finesse it. But like I was saying before, one of the things that is really, really interesting as to how students learn is when we start at the beginning, we get to the part of the problem, and then we go back to the beginning and do it again. So we get really, really good at playing, making music with the beginning part of the song, but then we kind of get to the end and it kind of goes, right? It just kind of falls apart because we haven't spent as much time. So here's one trick that I've learned along the way, and I encourage students to do this quite often because it is a lot of fun, is to start backward. Now, I don't mean playing the song backward. That would be really weird, wouldn't it? But starting, say, at the last four measures of the song or the last phrase of the music, start there. Focus on that first so that then, as you're building and adding to it, now you get to the point where from beginning to end is very smooth and even sounding and confident all the way through. Ultimately, the whole point in practice is not to improve your skills. Really, it isn't. It is, but it isn't, because ultimately, musicianship really comes from confidence. If you're confident in what you're doing, and you're confident in your abilities, you're confident in the work that you've put in, you will make excellent music. You will make music that people connect to, and that's the goal. When we're not really putting in the effective practice that we need, or we're doing just enough to get by, it shows. And I've had I've had that happen to me many times in my life where I didn't quite put in the necessary time and it showed. And I got called out on it because I didn't always do the best work. And so I've learned from those experiences. And so once I finish this video, guess what I get to do? I get to go practice because in a couple of weeks, I'm accompanying orchestra students on their solos. And the music is not easy. The music is fast. And so even though I'm not the one being judged, that's what I get to tell students when I'm working with them on accompaniments is you're the one being judged, not me. So I could just be playing whatever in the background and it doesn't really matter. It does matter because I want them to be confident and I want them to do the best job that they can. And I want what I play to support them and help them to do their best. So that means that I have to put in practice as well. I can't just say, okay, I'm just going to wing it and life will be great. Because that's not putting in my best, right? And if I'm putting in my best to help the students put in their best, then we all win, right? And that's the whole idea, that it's all about team. It's all about working together. That's why you'll see in a lot of my social media posts, I have the hashtag Music Builds Community, because it does. We have a community not only of musicians, but when you're making music, you create this community because you have an audience. That audience could be big, that audience could be small. But that's the whole idea. So when you're practicing, excuse me, when you're practicing, make sure that you're following those steps of going slow, working on the rhythms, sometimes independently of the music, that you fix and focus in on just that specific little spot that you're having trouble with, the parts leading into and out of it, looking at the end of the line to the beginning of the next line, and sometimes even starting at the end and working your way forward. Those are some really, really great tricks. But before I end my live video today, I want to wish a very happy birthday to the most amazing John Williams. It is his 90th birthday today. He is the creator of those themes that we know and love from Star Wars, from Jurassic Park, and so many more. So it is a wonderful day to go listen to some of the Star Wars soundtracks, Jurassic Park soundtrack, listen to some John Williams music today and celebrate and be thankful for the genius and the gift that is John Williams. Thanks for tuning in. I will talk to you again next Wednesday.